morning and good afternoon to in-house counsel from all across North America. Welcome to In-House Connect. My name is Shai Mahani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of In-House Connect. I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you for spending your lunch or your breakfast time with us. And special thanks to our wonderful presenters, Josh Kalmus and Vincenzo Purificato, for putting on this fantastic presentation about how in-house counsel can save big bucks on outside counsel spend. And of course, special thanks to our sponsor, Persuit. For those of you who are here for the first time, let me give you a quick bit of background on In-House Connect. In-House Connect started 11 years ago as a New York City-based meetup group for in-house counsel. Every month, we would organize free CLE classes, which are hosted by different law firms. And every 6 months, we would host fun and festive networking mixers. Over the years, we've helped thousands of in-house counsel connect with outside counsel and peers alike. The group was humming along, and then COVID hit. We couldn't meet in person, so we met online. And so far, it's been a fantastic transition. We've attracted a much larger audience of in-house counsel from coast to coast and sometimes across the world. We've been able to facilitate way more networking, relationship building, and we've been able to feature high caliber speakers like the two we have today, who I'm going to introduce in just a few moments. This is our 17th event of the year, which is pretty crazy. It's probably a record for us. So let me know, is this your first IHC event? I'm curious, or are you a frequent flyer? Let me know in this poll. Let's get to today's event, Managing Outside Counsel for In-House Counsel. Our presenters today are Vincenzo Purificato and Josh Kalmus. Vincenzo is the Executive Director and Head of Strategic Change and Concierge Services and Outside Counsel Management at UBS. Throughout his career, Vincenzo has worked on various cost-saving initiatives related to the management of resources, both internal and external. This includes finding new and innovative ways to source legal support. In Vincenzo's current role, he leads a team with the goal of supporting in-house counsel, providing both administrative and expert support. Administrative support includes capturing demand and cost commitment approvals and legal invoice review. Expert support includes assessing legal matters and finding the most efficient and cost-effective ways to engage legal resources. For example, running RFPs, negotiating AFAs, assessing and sourcing potential, and unbundling legal work to shift certain tasks from law firms to alternative legal service providers. Our second presenter is Josh Kalmus. Josh is a founding team member and VP of Business Development at Persuit. Josh practiced as a commercial lawyer in Melbourne, Australia, before joining the founding team at Persuit. Josh relocated to New York City in 2018 to establish Persuit's New York office and grow Persuit's presence in North America. Josh has become a pillar in the widespread success of Persuit, as well in the education of in-house teams across the world in innovating their outside counsel engagement process. And we are very fortunate to have two experts in saving, outside counsel spend and saving big money on outside counsel spend. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Josh and Vincenzo to get things started.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Shai. And thank you, Vincenzo, for joining me today. We're super excited to be here. Having a quick look at the initial poll, Shai, it looks like we've got about 38% of the attendees today joining for the first time. So that's super exciting as well. A quick agenda for today. So the plan really is to dive in and talk about UBS's SmartSourcing framework and how they leverage Persuit to implement a competitive bidding program with their outside counsel, which drove millions of dollars and continues to drive millions of dollars in savings on their external legal spend. Some quick housekeeping. We plan to go through a few slides just to set the context and set the scene as to what UBS actually was able to achieve. And then the plan is to dive into the Persuit platform and have a bit of an interactive demo and actually show a few real-life use cases to bring it to life and show how they actually went about achieving what they've been able to achieve. So Vincenzo, super excited to be here with you today. I think with that, we can probably dive in. Maybe to kick things off, Vincenzo, I'd love to hear a little bit around the SmartSourcing framework and what that actually means in the context of an in-house legal department. I mean, you John Burke, the broader OCM team at UBS, really implemented a transformational approach to how you think about engaging external counsel. And we're fortunate enough to win the 2021 ACC Value Champ Award for what you actually implemented. So we'd love to just hear you articulate for the audience what SmartSourcing actually means and how it applies in the context of an in-house legal department.
Yep, sure. Thanks, Josh, and thank you everyone for joining today. So what we wanted to do is really change the way people look at their sourcing needs. When they have a matter, typically people would just, in-house counsel would just pick up the phone, call the law firm that they typically would hire over the years and just give them the work. We wanted to change that whole mindset so that they're looking at this and seeing all the available resourcing options. So what smart sourcing essentially is, it's an effective means of managing all of our external legal fees because it's providing a systematic method of evaluating all of the available resourcing options. And this works for any phase of a litigation or a transaction. So in 2019, UBS developed the smart sourcing framework. And the goal, like I said, of the framework is really to provide in-house counsel with guidance. What are the available options? How can they intelligently apply these resources in both a risk-appropriate and a cost-effective manner? So as you can see, what we developed was basically a decision path. And so when it's applied, it can be applied at any stage of a litigation or a transaction. And obviously, it's most beneficial at the inception of a case when we scope it out. And the decision path begins by determining whether the matter is one that can be handled internally with the resources that we have available in-house and with the required expertise, right? So those are the two reasons why we would ever go outside is either we don't have the resources or we don't have the expertise. So that's the first question. Can we do it ourselves? If we cannot handle it internally with our current teams, then we explore resource fluidity or augmenting our staff. And we can do that by the use of secondees or external legal service providers. If none of these options are sufficient, then the decision should be made to engage outside counsel. So then how do we help the attorneys? How do we make them make that decision, the best decision possible to engage outside counsel? So consideration should be given to which outside counsel based on the type of matter, the associated risk, and potential exposure to the firm, etc. Under the framework, we wanted to develop a set of tools or different elements that the attorneys can use to help them make these decisions as they're going on this journey through this path. So that included things like the creation of panels. So we created litigation panels, employment panels. We're actually in the process of implementing a DE&I panel, which is really interesting. We created a commercials repository so that all of the information, all of the commercial terms that we've negotiated with our panel firms is all readily available in one source. We use artificial intelligence, so we've implemented various artificial intelligence tools. And then, of course, one of the main focal points was how can we get competition? How can we have the law firms now compete for the work that we know we have to give out? And so we looked around, and that's when we decided, let's create a partnership. And that's when we found Persuit, and that's when we sparked this partnership with Persuit. And it's been really great. The last year and a half has been an amazing transformation. We're really utilizing the tool now to get competitive bids, and we're seeing benefit on both sides. We're seeing benefit internally because we're able to get the competition going between the firms and really drive true market pricing. But then on the flip side, we see that the outside counsel firms, they're giving us positive feedback as well, because what they're gaining is transparency and insight into our cases that maybe in the past they would have never even had the opportunity to see those cases and have the opportunity to bid on that. So we like to see this as a win-win. And like I said, it's just been giving us fantastic feedback, both internal and external.
Fantastic. Yeah. And thanks for that, Vincenzo. And a really thoughtful decision tree, essentially, that you've mapped out to guide the lawyers as to what they should be thinking about and making more considered choices rather than what you said, the traditional way of simply just defaulting the knee-jerk reaction to picking up the phone, exactly. But actually thinking at first instance, okay, we've got all these resources available to us, both internal and external. Let's think about what's most applicable to this particular set of circumstances and then guide ourselves through this decision tree. And as you mentioned, the outside counsel piece is really the puzzle piece where Persuit fits in. Once you've decided, okay, we need to go to one of our panel firms, how do we actually want to go about engaging them? And that's certainly what we're going to walk through for the balance of today's presentation and when we get into the demo and show some examples. Just to provide a bit more color for those that are perhaps getting introduced to Persuit for the first time as to what Persuit actually is, as Vincenzo alluded to, an outside counsel engagement platform that makes it really easy for in-house legal teams to go out to their preferred firms and bid out their matters on a matter-by-matter basis and drive cost savings just by bringing some competition to the process. So Vincenzo, I think you make a really good point that you know who your firms are. You've gone through the exercise to establish those panels and specialty panels, right? Your M&A firms, your employment firms, your litigation firms. So then within the context of those firms, they're all top tier. They've all been kind of vetted for quality, if you like. They're all really high caliber and going to get you a good outcome. How do you decide which one of those firms is best placed for that particular matter? And that's really where the competition and competitive process kicks in. And this schematic kind of outlines the process that a lawyer would undertake, doesn't it? When you think about, okay, the first thing I need to do is create a scope of work. So the scoping phase, just like the behavior of the past where you might send an email to one firm and ask for a cost estimate, but providing a bit more framework, a bit more structure to do that in a more detailed way. Then invite the firms on the panel, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6 firms that you decide as a managing attorney that you think are going to be best placed to get the best outcome for this particular matter. The firms then log into the platform, they submit their proposal where they'll provide pricing, they'll provide answers to some qualitative questions, as well as some diversity information. You've got the ability to run a reverse auction, and we'll spend a bit more time talking about what that looks like in just a moment. And then really it's about evaluating the proposals holistically, isn't it? And saying, okay, we've got the proposals back. We think law firm B is best placed for this particular matter, and we're going to go ahead and engage them.
That's right. Yeah, and what we see too is it's giving the opportunities of firms to be creative, right? So it's not just giving us hourly rates. They're also being creative in terms of scoping out different types of alternative fixed fee arrangements. So that's how they can compete for the work. That level of creativity is helping them stand out amongst their peer firms when everything else seems to be on an equal footing. That level of creativity and what else can they add into the mix, that's giving them a step up in terms of trying to win that work.
Absolutely. And certainly the firms are the experts, right? They've got many clients that they represent. They've seen lots of creative ways. They've got a lot of data internally. So they're really well placed to kind of come to you and say, hey, look, I know you proposed a cap fee model for this particular engagement, but have you thought about doing a fixed fee by phase with a success fee built in? Right. So really being able to have that collaborative approach based on the expertise of the firms to propose something that might actually be more beneficial for that particular matter. And we'll show a few of those examples when we get into the demo. So Vincenzo, we've talked a bit about the SmartSourcing framework holistically, and then once an individual UBS attorney gets to the point where they say, okay, we need to go to outside counsel, that's where Persuit kicks in, and we've built a program around how the lawyers think about that. What was it just at a more holistic level about the Persuit platform that was most attractive for the UBS team? We speak a lot about the cost savings element, and that generally is the commercial reason we partner with a lot of your peers in the Fortune 500, but just curious to hear what the primary drivers of Persuit were for the UBS team.
Right, so 3 main objectives we set out when we wanted to partner with Persuit was really, like you said, reducing legal fees is always key, right? We have a large exposure in terms of our external legal fees, so we want to reduce that cost. So that was, of course, key. And second was to find a platform that was easy to use and almost self-service. And so what we found with Persuit is that after a few training sessions, the attorneys can actually log into the platform themselves, which they want to do. They want to be self-sufficient. So this platform is giving them the ability to scope out their matters, to log into the system, scope out their matters, submit the RFPs, do the assessment. So it's really a self-service tool for the attorneys. So that was really key because we didn't want to, implement some a burdensome tool, another process into the play. We wanted to get something that is replicating the process that they currently do by picking up the phone, but making it easier and putting it all together in one place. So that was really key. And then the other thing is really just to create competition, creating that competition amongst the firms and driving the work to our panel firms where we have the ability to to leverage other things that we've negotiated with those firms. So for example, with our master engagement letters, we negotiate things like free secundees, we negotiate things like counseling hours that are free, volume discounts. So through this tool, we're able to increase the competition and then drive the work to those panel firms to really get the full benefit of those engagements with those firms and those relationships.
Yeah. You make a great point around the ease of use. That is consistently what we hear time and time again, that if it's another tool that's going to be layered in and it's fiddly and cumbersome, it's dead in the water before it gets off the ground. We're kind of spoilt these days in our personal lives as consumers that the Netflix, the Amazons, the Googles, they've kind of set the benchmark, and that's now the expectation when we come to work, isn't it? That we have tools that are that simple and that intuitive and easy to use. We often call it the consumerization of enterprise apps. And I think John, who you work very closely with, said in the early days, it's not about what the tool can do, it's about who can use it. And really, the attorneys are the ones that are on the front lines. They've got the expertise, they know, and work really closely with outside counsel. They need to be the ones that are in there self-serving in a really streamlined and self-service way. So certainly that's something we'll show when we get in the platform. And of course, I know the templates are a big part of what that looks like in terms of making things easy and giving the lawyers at least a really solid starting point. So we'll certainly make sure we go through the templates in some detail. So Vincenzo, now I just want to pivot a little bit around to how we kind of approach the engagement. Lots of really ambitious goals that we set for ourselves at the outset. Clearly, you've done a power of work internally to build out that smart sourcing framework and had a really clear vision of the competition and what you wanted that to look like. But I'm sure you had to win the hearts and minds internally and get some early wins on the board. So do you just want to spend a bit of time talking about the approach from a pilot perspective that I know was very important to the UBS team?
Yeah, so we knew changing the culture, changing the mindset, that was going to be the biggest challenge, especially when it's a global bank. We're not just dealing in the US, we're dealing in all the global regions around the world. And so, you have different cultures, different mindsets, and people are just accustomed to doing business in a certain way. So it was really important for us to say, let's run a proof of concept where we can put through matters, various different matters in different regions, and really see, does it work? What do the attorneys think of it? And so that's what we wanted to do. So we engaged in a 12-week proof of concept. The results were great. I mean, we put matters through, we put litigation matters through, M&A transactions, some advisory matters across the board. We touched on all the different regions. So the US, EMEA, APAC, we put matters from all the different regions through, and then the results kind of spoke for themselves. I mean, the savings were fantastic, and all the feedback from the attorneys that actually went into the tool and saw it, they thought it was a fantastic tool. They all complimented the ease of use. And I think, again, like touching on that, that was the biggest thing. Because when you first tell them that we're implementing something like Pursuit, everyone takes a step back and says, what is this going to do for me now? How much more time do I need to devote to trying to get this going? I need to call counsel and get them onboarded as quickly as possible. And so once they actually went through the proof of concept, we showed them the results. They saw that we were turning these engagements around in just a couple of days. And that's turning them around from actually scoping out the matter, sending out the RFPs, and then actually going to contract, all within a couple of days. So that the turnaround time was incredible. And then really what we wanted to do then through the proof of concept was get champions. Some people, senior level, where they were really, embracing this whole idea, and that they can then help us make the argument, help us to spread the news around. And so I think that was really key. Once we had those champions that were going around and sharing the news to all of the GCs globally, then it made my life a lot easier to sell this. And then anyone that was a little bit hesitant, that's fine. There's always going to be some people that are a little hesitant in use. What we say to them is you really need to just test it out. You just need to see the platform. And it might not be perfect for every single matter, but take a look at the platform. And when we do that and they actually can see the templates and see the slides and see the way the platform works in a demo environment, that's really when you can win them over. So then what we did, as you can see on the board, in April 2021, we signed a 3-year agreement with Pursuit, which we were very excited about. It took us there a lot of work to get us there, and then we did it, and it was really great. And then in May 2021, we went live. and the savings have just been tremendous. We've put a lot of matters through the platform. The savings have been great. I don't know if you want me to touch upon the savings at this point, if we want to save that for later. It's up to you, Josh.
And no, absolutely, go ahead. If you've got those numbers handy, feel free to share them now. I know next we've got a bit of an example as to one of the reverse auctions, but maybe before we get into that, absolutely feel free to share some of those savings.
Okay, great. So as you said, we kicked off in May. So from May of 2021 through the end of the year, we sourced about $21.1 million worth of work, and that was about 30 plus matters. Again, ranging from litigations, M&A transactions, employment, the whole gamut of different types of matters. And we generated $8.6 million worth of savings, which is a 41% savings return, which was incredible. And the way we compare that is really, and the way we calculate the savings is looking at the average of the bids that are coming in, and everything is set at a baseline because we know what this work should cost us based on our historical data. So we know what the benchmark is. We compare the benchmark to the average bids and then the winning bid, and we take the difference, and that's how we're calculating our savings. So it's been really incredible. In 2022, the trend is continuing. It's still a 41% save. So from January through March, we've sourced about 4.5 million. It's about 18 plus matters, and we've generated $1.9 million worth of savings. So it's really at the forefront of what we're trying to do in terms of savings. And as people internally see the potential of Pursuit, we're starting to get more and more people put matters through, embrace it. And what's really cool too is we're starting to see different usage of it. So it's not limited to just outside counsel. We're starting to see that we can seek and scope out for a secondee if we need. We could put that through the tool and have the firms compete for the secondee work. Expert witness work, we've put that through. Consultants, we've had them go through the tool as well. And I think one of the real positives is nobody's shying away from the competition. We asked the firms to compete. They're all willing to do it. They love the idea. And so, like I said, it's a win-win because we're really driving the competition, driving that benchmark price. And the firms are getting that insight and saying, okay, we want to compete for the work. This is how we're going to do it. So it's really been a great success.
Yeah. And what I absolutely love, just coming back to the pilot approach, was the really pragmatic lens that the entire team brought to the pilot. And you essentially positioned it saying, look, just test it out. We're going to have all these preconceived notions, but we won't actually know until we run an individual matter for ourselves. Then we'll have a body of data that we can make a really informed analysis and form an opinion on. And just that lens, and then leaning into the process to test it out. We focus a lot on the cost savings so far, but what we always heard and what we continue to hear is once a lawyer's actually put one matter through and they see the other tertiary benefits above and beyond just cost, getting an AFA when they traditionally would have got hourly rates, or being able to ask some qualitative questions like, hey, firm, what's your strategy for success? How would you approach this particular matter? Getting those really valuable insights from the firms. Often the reaction is, wow, I thought this was a pure cost exercise. Look at all the other valuable insights I've unlocked by having a bit more structure and framework to the process. So just that lens of just test it out and then form an opinion, I thought that was just a really great approach that the entire UBS team embodied and that attitude as we kicked off the pilot. One key thing, Vincenzo, I wanted to just dive into and spend a bit more time on is the reverse auction or the real-time bidding functionality. So I might just spend a couple of moments setting the scene as to what that actually is, because whilst this is very common outside the legal department across the rest of the enterprise, traditionally it hasn't really been leveraged within legal. So just to explain that the concept of the real-time bidding, if you think of a traditional RFP process and inviting, in this example, 3 firms to submit an initial proposal, essentially what you're saying is on the following day for a 30-minute period, so we might give you 4 days to submit your initial proposal for this M&A transaction matter, but then on the following day for a 30-minute window or a 60-minute window, we're going to bring some price transparency and show you where you rank from a price point of view and give you the opportunity as a law firm to revise your price to improve your competitiveness. And that mechanism has been a really effective way to unlock the true market price. And that's a term I know you use very often internally, it's just bringing some visibility to the law firms so they can say, okay, here's where my peer firms are for this particular matter at this time of year, and have given them the chance to revise their price to improve their competitiveness. And I know our founder and CEO, he was a former big law partner at DLA Piper. Jim ran their construction litigation practice out of Dubai. And he used to always say he hated losing work to his corporate clients based on price. And all they would say is, Jim, you priced yourself out of it. And he would have no opportunity to know, was he 5,000 higher or was he 500,000 higher? And that was the end of the process. So that was the genesis, essentially, for him building out Pursuit. And really, it's just about bringing that price transparency and being able to tap into the capacity of your law firms on a per matter basis. And Vincenzo, I know this is something that's been really popular internally. Do you mind just spending a couple of moments talking about the adoption of the e-auctions across the teams, and maybe just shedding a bit of color on this particular M&A matter, which I think was part of the pilot, if I recall correctly?
Yeah, so the M&A transactions have really worked out well going through the platform. So typically, what we did was we set some thresholds. So we require all of our attorneys to source out and to bid any work that's going to be an engagement over $50,000, and then we ask them to put the matter through the additional e-auction process if it's going to be a larger matter over 250,000. That doesn't mean that if it's going to be less, they can't use the e-auction, but we're requiring them over 250. Let's put it through the e-auction because we're getting that additional competition going. And so, as you can see, something like this M&A transaction here, we put it through, and this was probably 3 of our top tier firms that were bidding for the work. Something to note is that all the firms that we've actually reached out to, they were familiar with Pursuit. So it wasn't something that was just like, what is this? What are you trying to introduce to us? They've heard of it before. Most of them have already submitted something through the platform. So that helped the transition as well. And so on an M&A transaction, you can imagine a lot of the information is very sensitive. And so there was a lot of skepticism. Can we actually put an M&A transaction through the platform? And so we said yes, because you don't need to give that level of detail where you're trying to divulge all of this CID information and so on. We just need to give some basics. We need to list out exactly what is the work that's going to be performed, which we do using these templates that we built out. And I think one of the M&A transaction template is actually really good. And it's been used over and over again at UBS. And so once they have all that information, you're giving the firms everything they need to submit their initial proposal. And at first, the firms are a little hesitant. How are we going to bid it out? How are we going to submit our initial proposal? And what we see a lot of times is it's pretty in line with our standard hourly rates that we've put in place with those firms, because we tell them that's your baseline, that's your starting point. So of course, a lot of the firms, that's what they come in with. And they want to see, how am I ranking against my other firms? So it's giving them that insight right off the get-go, right? They already see, okay, without changing anything, how am I already priced against my peers? And then they can already see, wow, okay, I need to come down in price. I'm ranked as third. I'm ranked as second amongst my 2 other peers. And so over that 30-minute period, you start to see small shifts, right? And a lot of times you see it close to the end of the 30-minute window where the firm's like, okay, if we really want to win this work, we need to bid in. And we saw that shift. And so something like this one, I think we had 24 price revisions in 73 minutes. It was just wild to see how the firms were really competing for the work. And then what we do after the fact, once the firm either wins the work or they lose the work, they'll reach out and they want to understand, did we do something wrong? Was it price alone? Why did we not win the work? And we can have that informed discussion. And what this information is doing for us as well, with all our panel firms, we'll have annual relationship meetings. And in the past, we didn't have that information to really have that informed discussion as to why they're not winning the work. Now we can actually point to something tangible. We can say, we asked you to bid on 10 M&A transaction matters. And on all 10, you were consistently the highest firm amongst all your peers. That's an issue. Then it's price alone. The flip side is maybe they weren't the highest price, but maybe some of the other questions, like you said, some of that other information, they weren't showing that they were the right firm. Maybe it wasn't the right expertise. Maybe they hadn't done a lot of this work in the past and they weren't familiar with it. But going through this process gives us all of that information to be able to have that discussion with the firms. And then the firms can reset so that in the future, they know either it's a price issue or they need to come down and come up with something more creative, or they need to just give us a different team. Maybe they weren't putting in their A team. Maybe they need to say, okay, for this matter, in order to win it, we need to give you the A team. And so that's what we've seen. We've seen that kind of a transition. And I am happy to say that it's not always the same firm that's winning. So we are seeing that change. We've run a couple M&A transactions. I think it's been various firms that have actually won the work. So that's really nice to see, because in the past, it would have typically gone to one or two and always the same firms. Now it's different firms are understanding why they're not winning, and they're changing something internally, and they're ready to compete again for the work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So certainly a couple of comments off there. The opportunities that the firms are now getting, I know that's really important to the team, isn't it? That
yes.
Essentially in the past, they may have, one of the lawyers may have just picked up the phone and single sourced the M&A firm that they've always used. Now the other M&A firms are getting more opportunities to at least see what's on the docket, put their best foot forward, increase their footprint for the UBS M&A portfolio, which is really important. And absolutely, you're spot on around the data-driven conversations that you're now able to have with your panel firms. And we hear that a lot across all our clients, to be able to say, look, in the past, I probably attended those QBRs and annual performance reviews, and they weren't really needle-moving conversations. Now I can come in, I've got all the data in front of me, and I can have really targeted conversations. And the goal is to strengthen the relationship, absolutely. And the firms want the feedback, and the most mature clients like you are giving them that feedback and closing the feedback loop. And that's certainly what a mature program looks like. So all really great points there. Vincenzo, next, I did want to touch a little bit on some of the approaches and tools that you leverage to get the program off the ground. You spent a bit of time talking about that threshold, essentially saying any matter that's over $50,000 should go through the platform and get at least 3 proposals. Any matter with an anticipated spend of over $250,000 should go through the platform and use the reverse auction functionality. So that's often a really key pillar of any communications plan, to make it really clear to the lawyers, okay, here's when I need to use the platform. But as we've touched on a couple of times, this is a fundamental change and shift to how lawyers internally are going about engaging external law firms. And many of the internal lawyers would have been at UBS for many years, perhaps come from law firms themselves or other corporate legal departments. So certainly a big shift. What were some of the other approaches from a change management perspective that you and the OCN team really focused on to ensure that the program post-pilot got off the ground?
So a lot of things we wanted to ensure was that for people, like as we said, we wanted it to be self-service. So we wanted to give people that information up front. So we developed FAQs, we developed guidance videos. So all of that type of information is now available to the attorney. So if they don't want to reach out, they don't want the support, they just want to be able to do it on their own, they have all of the tools necessary to understand how to log into the system, how to work the system, examples of how they can do it. They have all of that information at hand. The other thing that was key that you actually mentioned earlier was the templates. Those are key. So we started through the proof of concept, building out some of those different templates. And what they do is really, they set the stage. So for example, on a typical arbitration case, we now have various templates that are broken out by phase, by task, and they're very easy to use, where you can just plug in the information, send it to the firms, and now our firms are becoming familiar with that. So they're able to turn these around so quickly because they have those templates. So when the attorneys first saw this, their question was, now I have to spend time trying to put all my information, all my knowledge that I would typically just, relay over the phone into a platform. Using this template, all that information is easily put in there. They're saved, and then they just need to be updated for the next case. But the turnaround time is really quick on that. So those were very key. The other thing is we wanted to provide them the support. So not only providing them the pursuit support, where we're saying you have a new matter, reach out, we can help you scope out your matter, how to use the system. So we have that, and Pursuit's been great on that. So they're always willing to jump on the line and support our teams, whether it's for a large team or even just on an individual matter with just one attorney. The other thing that we did as part of our SmartSourcing framework, we developed a concierge service. So this year we rolled out concierge services. So now when an attorney has a matter, we're providing them the administrative support, and we're also providing them expert support, because not all the attorneys have the time to go through the administrative burden of actually opening up a matter in our matter management system, going through Pursuit, putting in the information. So we have a concierge service where we're supporting them on that administrative stuff. So as soon as they have a matter, they reach out, we help them put all the information into the platform. And then the second part of it is, as part of this concierge service, is really giving them the additional information. Sometimes they don't know which firms that we should put through. We tell them 3 to 5 firms. How do they know which firms? So we have tools in place like the commercials repository, where we can say, these are our approved firms. All of our approved firms are now in Pursuit. So you can use any one of those firms. But how do we know how to narrow that down to the 3 to 5 firms? We can look at, what do we have engaged with the firms? What do our contracts say? What are the prices that we already have in place? That sets the benchmark, right? So we can already weed it down by looking at, what are the peer firms at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3? That gives us all that information. So that was key to do that for them. And then the other thing is really giving them information like alternative fee arrangements. Some attorneys aren't too familiar with that. And some of them want to understand, what is the difference? What can we do? Which are the more suitable ones? And so together with Pursuit, we're able to give them examples on a litigation case. This might be the best option. We might want to break it down into phases. We might want to implement these various types of fixed fees, capped fees, et cetera. And so we're just trying to give the attorneys all of that information as possible, so that they're not just on their own trying to make these decisions. Yes, it's self-service, but they want to be able to just reach out and get that little bit of extra information. And so whether we have it, listed on our intranet sites, or if they have the information, they know they can reach out to myself and my concierge team, they can reach out to Pursuit for support. They pretty much have 24-hour support any way they need it. So that's really been key for them. And like I said, the other thing was really, how do we manage when and why they should be using this? We have a process where every time they're spending money from the bank, right, you need to engage outside counsel. They need to raise a request. They need to raise a demand approval request. So we already know they're going to raise a need for outside counsel. They have to go through a process, which they come through us, through my team, and we can already say, okay, this is suitable for Pursuit. This is not suitable for Pursuit. And I think it's important too to note that sometimes there are exceptions. Not everything is going to go through Pursuit. There might be a repeat case where it doesn't need to go through the tool, but they'll come to us. They need that information to understand when and why they should be using that.
Yeah, I think that's a really important qualifying point, that not every matter is going to be suitable for whatever reason, and it's not so black and white and rigid. There's flexibility, there's exceptions, and it's just really about having the process in place to say, okay, this is what makes most sense for the business in this particular matter. Let's take this path, whether that's outside Pursuit or through the platform and through the competitive bidding program that your SmartSourcing framework has built in. Vincenzo, you hit the nail on the head around the templates, and I think that was what we wanted to get to next. Actually transition now into the platform and have a look about, okay, how would one of my lawyers go about creating a scope of work and sending out an RFP to some of my panel firms? So Vincenzo, just checking, I've toggled now out of the slides into the demo environment. Can you see that?
Yes, I see the home screen, your home screen with all the
Great.
different menus.
Perfect. That's where we want to be. So now, for everyone's benefit, we're just going to walk you through what would the typical process be. Let's pretend you're a UBS lawyer or you're an internal lawyer within your legal department. You know you have to run a competitive process through the platform. Where do you start? How do you get there? So you click Create Request, and this is where we come to those templates, Vincenzo, you were talking about, right? Where you're going to have a UBS tab here with company-specific templates that have been put together to really give the attorneys a starting point, a pre-built scope of work broken out by phase with particular pricing structures built in, so they can simply leverage the template that's most applicable and start populating the scope of work as it pertains to that particular matter. Vincenzo, do you just want to shed a bit more color as to how you actually went about building out some of those specific templates for the different teams in different regions?
Yes, I think what we did, which was key, was to have the head of those different teams, so the head of the US litigation team, the head of the M&A team, join a call with Pursuit, and then just walk through, what's typical? When do we engage outside counsel? What is it that we're looking for? Because a lot of times it's not for the full case. A lot of times we have internal resources, and it's, just what are those different phases? What are those different tasks that we need to engage outside counsel on? So once we have that background of information, then we can look to create these templates. Maybe it is a phased approach. Maybe it's not a phased approach. And then we also find out, is it something where fixed fee pricing is something that's suitable? Is it not suitable? And we have those different options that we can build in. What other questions are important? If it's a litigation case or an arbitration case, you might want to be more interested in who are the arbitration panel? Have we dealt with them before? There's various types of information. Is it something where it's almost like a run-of-the-mill case? If that's the case, then what are the deciding factors? Maybe D&I comes in. We want to pick a firm that's diverse. We want to create thresholds where we're using these D&I firms, and these are the perfect cases for that. So getting all that information from the teams themselves firsthand, letting them be the ones to dictate to us how the template should be, that was key. We didn't want to create something in a bubble and then just go back to them and say, here, take this, we created for you. We're telling them, you guys create it. Tell us exactly how you want this to be, and we're going to put it together for you so that going forward, it's your template, not ours.
Exactly right. And bringing them on the journey to kind of be really involved in getting that template structured in the way that they're familiar with, that they like to engage, is really important. Pursuit's got some best practice templates that give you a starting point that we say, this is typically what we see work really effectively. But to your point, the M&A team might really like to engage on a cap fee basis. So that way, when we come down to the pricing section, their template will already be built with cap fees and asking, okay, for a total cap fee for the life of the matter, and then a cap fee by phase. So really structuring the template in a way that's pre-built for them. So that way, really, all that's required to do is come in and provide some high-level matter background. So you just type in like you would in an email, here's the nature of the matter, here's what we're looking for help on, in a couple of sentences, already have the pricing structure built out, and they can choose, do they want a fixed fee, a cap fee, a budget estimate? And then, as you said, Vincenzo, being able to ask some of the targeted questions, the template will give you a starting point. You can delete them if they're not applicable. You can add, of course, any additional questions on a per matter basis based on what you're looking to uncover. So the whole point here, give the teams, the respective teams, a starting point, a pre-built scope of work in a structure that they're familiar with, and then start to populate the matter-specific elements, which, as you mentioned earlier, allows them to run this process in a really streamlined way, because they've got it pre-built. They can come in with a few clicks, they can populate the additional matter-specific information. They can get down to the request settings and say, is this over 250? Am I running an auction? Yes or no? If yes, when do I want to set that up? And then lastly, who are the firms I'm inviting? Who are the 3 or 4 or 5 panel firms that I want to invite to submit a proposal? And then click send. So super streamlined. The templates are all about giving a starting point. I think the approach the UBS team talk of getting the heads of practice areas involved and their teams involved in putting together a template for their specific team is the best approach, because that way something's not created in a bubble and then they're just expected to use something that's completely foreign to them. So Vincenzo, we've seen how do we go about creating the scope of work. This was the M&A example we just looked at. Now I quickly want to jump in and say, okay, great, we've created the scope of work, we've sent it out to our panel firms, we've asked for proposals. What does it look like when the proposals come back? So if I just jump in there and jump into an example, perhaps I'll stick with an M&A example, given we just went through an M&A template. So here's what it looks like when the proposals come back. We click back onto the matter, we click on the proposals tab, and this is where we get a breakdown of each firm that was invited and their proposals, which will include price at the total price level. And then if we scroll down and start to have a look, you also get pricing at the phase level. Now, I know that's really important, isn't it, Vincenzo? Because it's one thing to have the price at the top line level, but then being able to get visibility at the phase level and actually compare at the phase and activity level, that's really important for the team as well.
Yeah, and what we do too as part of our process is obviously we have a robust forecasting process for each matter and a budgeting process. And so by doing this, we're able to tick and tie the forecast for the matter back to something like this. So if the firm is saying, $1 million for this case, we're able to have the firm break it down by the phase, so then we can track against it as well, and we can see if we're actually benefiting or we're not benefiting, right? If we don't have that phased approach and we just have a high level number, we don't know for future what did something actually cost us. By breaking it down by phase, now the next time we do another M&A transaction, we know what the benchmark should cost. What have we paid for this in the past, this particular phase, this particular task? And I think that data is very important. So as we go forward, we can always improve more and more and have the firms compete against that new benchmark.
Yeah, absolutely. And that ties back to the data piece you touched on earlier, not only around the relationship management and being able to have more targeted conversations, but from a benchmarking perspective now, actually getting should cost indicators as to what things should cost in certain regions for certain matter types at the phase and activity level, and giving you that benchmarking information. I've just jumped into another example, Vincenzo, here, a litigation example. So we saw the M&A. We've now got a commercial litigation matter we're looking at where same thing, went out to 3 firms. The last example we looked at was cap fees. This is now fixed fees. And being able to break it down by phase, again, in the context of litigation, we're going to have different phases to M&A, of course. So what do they look like? Well, we've got the initial case assessment, and we can compare each firm at that phase level. We then scroll down, we've got the pre-trial pleadings in motion, we've got discovery. And I think one of the really important elements and parts of the process, Vincenzo, is setting really strong assumptions and quantifying the assumptions at the outset. So that way, when the proposals come back, each firm is giving you a price on the same set of assumptions. As you can see here, you've clearly specified, we want you to assume 4 depositions, 3 experts. That way, when the firms come back, you're not having one assuming 2, one assuming 20. That makes your lives as the UBS team much harder. So going through the exercise, putting in those quantities allows you to then really neatly come in and truly compare, okay, this particular firm has given me $44,000 for 4 depositions, and law firm number 3 has given me $100,000. So getting that granularity and being able to leverage that both throughout the life of this matter and future matters as well. Vincenzo, I know we touched a little bit on the questionnaire, but do you just want to talk a little bit around some of those targeted questions? Because I know we heard consistently from the UBS team, the reaction is, I thought it was purely a pricing exercise, but this is great. I get really valuable insights. 9 times out of 10, I would have gone with law firm A. I've always used them for this type of work, but law firm B just had a really clever strategy or spotted different issues I hadn't thought about. So just that part of the process and how that's been leveraged.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen our attorneys be creative with those questions now too. At first, they were just utilizing some of the questions that we had in there, kind of open-ended strategies for success questions. Now we're seeing them ask more targeted questions about, cases that they've handled in the past. What have they done with specific little tasks, specific items? How would they do it? How would they do it differently? That's really helping. We also ask questions about staffing. So I think that's really important too. So if it's not on a fixed fee basis, we want to understand, well, how are you planning on staffing this? Are you staffing it partner heavy? Are you staffing it with a lot of associate time? That gives us a lot of insight into what they're doing. And a lot of time when it's something like an advisory case, for example, or if it's a really big litigation, we want to know exactly who the team is. So having that information and seeing who's driving that team, what's the breakdown of that? Let us see all that information. And then taking it a step further, as we're getting into diversity, I could see you're sharing something about diversity there. That's something that we're trying to build out at UBS. We have a big focus on, creating a DE&I panel of our law firms and trying to drive work to those firms. A lot of times those firms that are diverse, they're forthcoming with that information. They want to share that, which is great. So what this is giving us is the ability to capture all that information. So now we have that data. So when all things are on an even field, we're able to see now, how can we shift work to a diverse firm? And this is giving us that information, that insight. And then in the future, we may want to set minimum standards. This is allowing us that information to see what is the breakdown of our firms across the world, not just in the US, not just in one region, across the world. How do they stack up against each other? Who's making that effort? Because we want to partner with those firms that have the same kind of principles that we have at UBS. And so that's giving us that opportunity to do that, which is really, really fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of beat me to it. I was going to kind of ask, what's next? What clearly you've implemented a fantastic smart sourcing program, the competitive bidding piece. You continue to see ongoing benefits. But what's the next iteration for UBS? UBS 2.0, outside counsel management, and it certainly sounds like the DEI module is the next big focus over the next few months. And we're seeing this across the board. This module was actually built at the request of a couple of clients that said, we've got really strong diversity goals. And we also, right now, we can report at the end of matters, what our spend with diverse timekeepers is, but we actually want to improve that. We want to increase our spend with diverse timekeepers. And how do we do that? Well, we ask the firms upfront before we actually award work, what's the diversity composition of the proposed team for this particular matter? And essentially, it's just about embedding that and institutionalizing that into your law firm selection process. So now, on a go-forward basis, we're asking about price, we're asking about some qualitative questions and strategies, and we're asking about the diversity composition of the team, and then doing a holistic evaluation to determine, okay, we think this firm is best placed for this matter, and here's why. So certainly hear you there. I'm conscious we're coming up on time, and I did want to allow a few moments for Q&A with the rest of the audience. But Vincenzo, any other final comments or things you wanted to add around what might be the next installment for UBS?
So I think like you said, and I've mentioned too, the data is really big. So we're building out a team at UBS where we're really taking all of the data that we have. Because in the past, we had a lot of the data at the end of the process. We had all that invoicing data. Now we have the data at the beginning of the process too. So really taking everything from front to back, putting all that data together, and now we can really make informed decisions. So we have panels in place. We have our approved counsel firms. Now we want to take it a step further to really cut down all those approved counsel firms. Have a small group. Have a focused panel for each of our main practice areas. This information is giving us that ability to do that in a really concise way, so that we know we're not leaving out firms and we're not giving too much work to firms that perhaps we shouldn't be giving to, right? Because we know those firms can compete for the work, and we're seeing the evidence here. The other thing is, with these processes, we're putting a lot of AFAs in place, right? A lot of alternative fee agreements in place. And so we're changing the commercial terms of our underlying master engagement letters. So obviously a lot of work has to go into now building out supplemental letters of engagement. And so that has to go through a process of putting together the contracts and so on. So we're working with Pursuit team on trying to take the information, just extract it from the winning bid, pull that right into our template, our supplemental engagement letter, and then send it out for signature. So really shrinking the time that it takes to do that as well, so that when we pay an invoice, we can point back to a supplemental engagement letter. So we have the evidence to support, why are we paying, a fixed fee invoice of $1 million? What's the support for that? We can point back to a supplemental engagement letter. And that also gives us the historical knowledge when we go forward and we say, okay, what did we pay for this in the past? We can point to these agreements. We can point to this information.
Fantastic. So certainly lots that's already been done, and lots that's on the roadmap and still to be done, and maybe another ACC award awaits you and the team as you start to pin down some of the data play. I think is the biggest one, and we see that across the board. You called it the buying information. I think in the past we've captured all the invoicing information. This is the upfront buying information that really has never been captured. If you think about it, it's been lost in those private phone calls or in an individual lawyer's inbox. Yep. Now it's all captured in one centralized spot. How can we leverage that and get the front to back full picture to become just more sophisticated around our programs and more thoughtful with our decisions? So with that, Vincenzo, I just want to personally thank you for walking us through the UBS SmartSourcing framework and the competitive bidding program that you've stood up, a really kind of best-in-class, best practice program. Certainly, it's been a pleasure working with you and the broader UBS team. And Shai, I just wanted to thank you as well for inviting Vincenzo and myself to walk through today's presentation. Wanted to allow some time for Q&A, but Shai, I might throw to you to kind of make any closing remarks.
Sure. So I thought the presentation was excellent. It was really cool to see Pursuit in action. And I thought it was a really informative and well-run presentation. We learned a lot about how this process works. We received a bunch of great questions in the chat box, and I'm really excited to get into it with you guys as well. I just want to remind you, we do have some polls. If you want me to run any polls, let me know, but we can get to the questions. So first question, and I took all the questions. If you submitted a question, they're going to be submitted. So if you have other questions, put it in the chat and I will submit it. And I kind of structured it in a chronological way. So generally, if a company out there or a legal department is considering to use Pursuit, how much in annual litigation or outside counsel spend do you believe like financially justifies this investment? Is there a threshold? Like, can you give us like guidelines around like, what numbers or what types of matter, like, if you can dive into that topic?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. What we often say is it really depends on the objectives of the particular legal department. So certainly we've focused a lot on cost, and that was really a primary driver for the UBS team. We've got other clients that focus more on purely having a centralized platform to automate an existing process. So they might not actually run many auctions, but for them, it's about capturing all the data, or it might be that DEI is the top focus. So whilst cost is a key element, it's not the only driver. What we typically say, and we've got clients with a spend as low as $2 million on outside counsel, all the way up to in the hundreds of millions. So generally, probably a 5 million plus is a substantial ROI that we've seen across the board. But having said that, there are some smaller departments that really, sometimes we describe them as emerging enterprise that might be, less than 5 million in outside counsel spend, but with a view to growing, and they want to get the foundations right at the outset, get some best practice process, really just have a system in place. And so we've partnered with them. But yeah, probably 5 million, north of 5 million, it's just a rough ballpark figure. But as I said, it depends what the primary objectives are, Shai.
Got it. Vincenzo, was that your motivation for, or I guess let me rephrase, what was your motivation for pursuing, an engagement with Pursuit? Was it to get matter management under control or try to save money? Was it a mixture of both?
Yeah, so there's a combination of both. I mean, the primary driver obviously is the cost savings, because we're one of the firms that Josh is talking about where our fees are really at that high level, right? So any dollar counts that we can cut off. And what we did is, we look at our cost as a holistic approach, right? It's the internal cost and also the external cost. And so we're talking about a really large footprint in terms of cost. So that was the major driver for it. But then again, really to put some process around this, right? So we get away from, like Josh said, from attorneys just picking up the phone and calling, and we lose all that information. And we're driving work then to the wrong firms. We negotiate these great engagements with firms and we put in place these panels. But if we don't have a process to pull it all together, then we're not really benefiting or utilizing those panels and utilizing our firms to the best of their potential to get all those benefits. So it was twofold. It was really for the savings, obviously, but then also to put a process around this to get the best benefit, drive the work to the key firms, get the benefits from them.
Next question. What about the volume of requests from lawyers? How does that look like? And is it possible that the platform might create a bottleneck? Like, how do you deal with efficiency?
Yeah, so I think, Vincenzo, I might go first there and then throw to you and to talk with some more experience around how it's worked within UBS. As Vincenzo mentioned, a lot of our clients will go down a similar path where they'll set thresholds. And so they'll say, okay, if a matter is anticipated to be over $50,000, we want it to go through the platform. If it's anticipated to be over $250,000, we want it to go through the platform with a reverse auction function. And some other clients will say, if it's less than 50,000, we still want it to go through the platform, but you don't have to run an RFP. You can go to a single law firm. So really driving all their engagements through. But the whole premise is that it's designed to be self-service. So moving away from a centralized person or team that has to run all of them, because you're absolutely right, Shai. In those instances, you're going to get a bottleneck very quickly. But when it's self-service and it's the lawyer that's in there running the matters and engaging outside counsel, well, really, you're just replicating what traditionally would have been a phone call or an email and is now in Persuit. So certainly the best practice process to avoid any bottleneck situation is to have the Vincenzos of the world, the outside counsel management or legal ops, almost operating as the program managers with the support of Persuit, and then the individual lawyers in there creating their scopes of work, creating their RFPs and sending them to the external law firms. And really, it's, as Vincenzo said, once they've done it once or twice with some assistance, they're pretty self-sufficient because the platform is designed to be fairly intuitive for them. So that's what we see across the board. Vincenzo, I'm not sure if you've got any other color you wanted to add there.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I think we set those initial thresholds, as high as 250 and 50,000 and above, just because we knew we didn't have the bandwidth to support everyone on all of these matters. So setting those high thresholds, we looked at our historical data. We knew on a monthly basis how many matters over 50,000 come in, how many matters over 250 came in, and we were comfortable that we can support it with our concierge team and with the help of Persuit. As people become more self-sufficient and they're running their own matters, we're looking to reduce our thresholds. So we've only been operating for about a year or so, actually less than a year, and we're already focusing now on how can we shift that $50,000 threshold lower, because we see a lot of people that have matters below 50,000 that want to put it through the platform, and they're starting to do that. So by lowering that threshold, we know they'll be self-sufficient. They can go through the platform and do it on their own, and they don't need that hand holding anymore. And like I said, it's taken us less than a year to get to that point. So it's really good.
Got it. Kind of building off of that question, do you ever feel like you are comparing apples and oranges with different bids? And if so, how much iteration do you introduce into the process?
So another fantastic question. And I think we briefly touched on this, but perhaps in an ideal world would have loved a bit more time to delve a bit deeper. But probably the most important part of the process is in the scoping phase to set some really strong assumptions, because that way you're going to avoid an instance where you have apples to oranges proposals. So if you can get really good at saying, okay, here's the assumptions we want you to make: 10 witness interviews, 15 depositions, 500,000 documents to review, 10 trial days. They're the primary key cost drivers. And that way the proposals, when you get them back, are all going to consider the same set of assumptions. So that's really the best practice way to get apples to apples proposals. What sometimes happens is you might get a law firm that proposes something else or spots an issue that perhaps you hadn't at the outset when creating the scope. What you can do in a really effective part of the platform is to issue a clarification to say, hey, we've now actually updated the scope of work. We didn't think about this, but now we want everyone to go and revise their proposals to add in these assumptions. So a bit of an iterative process, but in a really streamlined way to make sure you've got truly apples to apples proposals, because that's the goal, right? We don't want to be comparing apples to oranges. That's going to create more work for everyone. So with the templates, with some experience on the Persuit side and experience on the law firm side, you've got 3 really great avenues to get really good at creating tight scopes of work. And to Vincenzo's point, once you've had a year of usage, you're sophisticated. It's kind of, you're up and running. You know how to create and develop the skills to be able to scope work in a really tight way. And so I think that's a really important part of the process to avoid those instances of apples to oranges. And then one comment we sometimes get is, well, does that mean I need to accurately predict the exact quantities of activities at the start of the matter? That's impossible. And the answer is no, you don't have to. But what you do is you make some best guess assumptions, which is leveraging previous data, which is leveraging law firm expertise, which is leveraging templates. And we might say, okay, we anticipate 10 depositions. What happens if there ends up being 20? Well, at least we know what the price per deposition is at the outset. We can adjust the price up by 10 times the cost of the deposition. So that's not to say it's a hard and fast, we've agreed $1 million, that's all we're paying. we've agreed $1 million and we've predicted as best we can, but we have a material deviation mechanism to be able to adjust the price up or down if things change. But we've got an apples to apples comparison at the outset.
That's you've kind of teased to the next question, but before we get there, Vincenzo, is that your experience? Like once you get a little bit of time under your belt, you're comfortable, everybody knows what they're doing, and you set those benchmarks, and that leads to success.
Yeah, 100%. And as the users continue to use the platform once and twice and 3 times, the templates become more robust. We know what questions to ask, how to ask them. We know which assumptions we should be making. So if it's an arbitration, we know the list of assumptions that are typically going to apply. And then in the end, like Josh said, there's always a material deviation clause. And then all the way at the end of the process, we have to contract. We have to document this. So we can put language into the contract, into the supplemental engagement letter, to make reference to the fact that from time to time there might be something that's going to be out of scope or something that we don't know going in. And the firms understand that, and we understand that. So it's never going to be where we're capturing everything 100%. There always has to be that little bit of wiggle room, but we can make up for that in terms of the material deviation clause and in the contracts.
So let's talk about changes. There was a couple of questions, or there was one question and one like +1 to the question around, what if the scope of work changes? So you talked about like a material deviation clause. Can you dive into that a little bit more? So like, let's say there is a litigation, the budget is $1 million, we agree, and then, the 10 depositions becomes 20, or motion to dismiss totally gets denied, and there's more litigation or something happens. Can you give us examples in practice of how Persuit handles that and what the process is?
Yeah, so certainly the whole process and approach is that a basis for a change in price, which we're going to agree up front, is not really going to be dictated by time spent. What's going to dictate a change in price is going to be a change in scope. So we will put our best guess efforts based on all the data, all our experience, to come up with a really strong scope of work and try and anticipate what we think is going to occur for the particular matter. We'll get price according to that scope of work. Now, if that scope of work changes, i.e. we assume 10 depositions and 5 experts, but instead we had 20 depositions and 10 experts, well, clearly that's a fundamental change to the key activities that we scoped out at the outset. Therefore, absolutely, we should be increasing the price and we should be paying the firms more because they perform more work. But if we assume 10 depositions and 5 experts, and there were 10 depositions and 5 experts, then there hasn't been a fundamental change to the scope. Therefore, there's not going to be a basis. So really, it's a mechanism to bring a lens of getting really good at scoping the work and then adjusting the price only when the fundamental scope changes, and bringing that mechanism to how we approach legal matters, and giving us a better starting point at the outset. As Vincenzo said, it's not a crystal ball that's going to get 100% of things right all the time, but it's changing the traditional approach of just starting to work the matter on an hourly rate basis and clocking up lots of hours and very quickly getting things out of control. Let's set some guardrails based on what we think is going to occur and use those guardrails to guide us throughout the life of the matter. So when things do change, we can come back and have a really strong reference point as to how we're actually going to handle the changes that ended up happening. Vincenzo, I'm not sure if there was anything I missed there.
I think that's exactly right. And I think, the more experienced people get in scoping out their matters, we tend to see them really breaking out individual tasks, breaking out individual phases. So that way we're only paying for the work that's actually performed. So we're not paying $2 million on a fixed fee. We're paying $100,000 for a motion for summary judgment. If that doesn't come to fruition, we don't have to pay for that. And the same way, you're paying for the work that's actually going to happen. So phase 1 occurs, we pay that phase 1. Phase 2 occurs, we pay that phase 2. And that's the way we structure it. So the more details you have around structuring it and phases and breaking down the tasks makes it a lot easier to avoid those kinds of pitfalls.
Do you put structure into what would happen if there's a cost overrun or a time overrun or a scope overrun? So what happens if there is a deviation from the scope? Like, do you have that set in advance? Is that part of the bidding process?
So something we'll do as part of the contracting process. So if it's a fixed fee, we might build in a collar. We might build in various different collars with percentages. So we can share the risk and we can share the benefit with the firm. So for example, anything over by a certain percentage, that's going to be the benefit that's going to be shared, right? So if the firm can be more efficient and they can work less and they're not building up the hours, that's where they're going to see their savings, and that's where they're going to see the fixed fee really benefit them. And the reverse happens. If it takes more time and they're exceeding the amount of work that's the fixed fee, there's going to be a little bit of a buffer, but that's where UBS is going to see the savings, right? That's where we're saying, okay, even though you did so much more time, we still have that, we're not paying you for that. So there's a built-in factor there when we get to the contracting stage, and we can also build that in. We can do the collars in the platform itself when we're building out the fixed fees.
Got it. Thank you. Next question, and this was before the slide about, or the part about D&I, but D&I, how do you manage D&I goals in your RFPs and other factors that go beyond price and strict experience? So we saw that in the demo, you had that broken out, and I thought it was really, really cool because you had it, percentage of diverse lawyers. Yeah, let's go back to that if you don't mind. What percentage of the business generation credit is going to go to diverse lawyers? I think that's a great question. And we had a presenter on last year who said like origination credit is the key to helping diverse lawyers get more power in the law firms.
Progress.
So
Yep.
It's a great question. Is this typically what you provide in the platform? Is there other questions? Are firms like they have this information readily? Like, I guess, can you do a little bit of a deep dive into this subject, D&I and other non-D&I issues?
Absolutely. It's a great question. And certainly this DEI module was put together and kind of co-built with a handful of clients that said, look, we really want to start to address this and embed this into our law firm selection process. It's a key outside counsel selection goal. And we're really focused on actually the career opportunities and career progression for leadership opportunities for diverse timekeepers as well. So that's where things like, well, is the lead or second chair for this matter diverse? Shai, as you talked about, is the business origination credit or origination credits, is that going to diverse lawyers? So taking it kind of to the next level and really drilling down and saying, okay, what are the leadership opportunities for diverse timekeepers? So these 4 hard-coded questions were pre-built into our diversity module. So simply the client just needs to turn this on, and they don't have to redraft the questions each time. It's just click of the button, they'll spit them out. Some clients have more company-specific questions they want to ask. So in those instances, they will add their own diversity-specific questions or additional diversity questions that they create in the questionnaire. So the questionnaire gives them the flexibility to ask any additional questions. But the benefit of the diversity module is you get quantified answers, and then they can report on the metrics that they're capturing, which can help with things like Mansfield certification and other certifications as well. So this is what the diversity module looks like and is a key pillar in the overall holistic evaluation and being able to really easily compare side by side. Okay, law firm B has 100% of the origination credits going to diverse timekeepers, whereas this firm's got 52. That's just something for us to consider before we actually select a firm for this matter. And then, Shai, to the second part of your question around the questionnaire. So this is completely editable. So this is an example of I think a litigation matter where they ask for strategies for success, experience with the judge. On a matter-by-matter basis, the client can come in and add any additional questions. So anything from diversity to regional expertise, whatever you want to ask, you can just simply draft the question and add it to that particular matter, essentially just adding onto the template that you're working off.
That's really impressive. I guess, Vincenzo, have you like leveraged the data in this platform and like shared it with higher up, shared it with, GC of the legal department? Has it, been used generally? I mean, it's really fantastic. I'm very intrigued by this myself.
In
Would love to
terms
hear
of
your experience.
Yeah, in terms of the DE&I information, we're still capturing all that information. So it's definitely a plan. Like I said, we have big guidelines and a big initiative where we're trying to really build out the DE&I program. And so this data is going to be key. We're in the process of building out our DE&I panels. And so as part of that, we want to utilize some of this information as well. And one of the things that you see is the little flags where you can find out if the firm is a NAMWOL firm, it's a Mansfield rule. You see all those little flags, they pop out at an attorney that maybe it's not as not every attorney knows that information. So having those little pop-ups is really key for them to understand what it is. And so now having this information and having the guidelines that we're setting in place is really going to give them everything they need to make that informed decision. And like I said, when all things are on an even field, right, and where it's the same cost and everything else is the same, this might be a deciding factor that an attorney wants to consider. Or it might be where we're setting minimum standards. We need to go with these firms. We're trying to increase the amount of usage of these types of firms. So I think over the next year, we're going to see a lot of that change at UBS, and we're really going to utilize this information. Currently, we go with a lot of the questions that are pre-populated. I know as we develop the DE&I panel and we move more into this, we're going to probably, like Josh said, build in some of our own questions so that we can have more of that quantitative information.
Yeah. And just to, you make a great point around the diverse firms as well. So Shai, this is the module that allows you to ask these questions at the matter level. One other feature we've got is we've got a strategic partnership with NAMWOL. So essentially, if I come into a request, what that means is that in the firm contacts, we've got the NAMWOL directory front and center. So in the instances that our clients want to consider NAMWOL certified firms, so the National Association of Minority and Women-Owned Law Firms, making it really visible front and center, so it's easy for the managing attorney to come in, find out who a NAMWOL certified firm is within their jurisdiction for this practice area, easily select them and invite them to participate in the RFP. So that's a partnership we've been pretty excited about, and a number of our clients have leveraged.
Great. Next question and general topic. People are asking about the long-term firms that they engage, legacy firms. And quality is the most important thing, and maintaining that relationship with their existing firms. How does that play into the platform? I'd imagine many legal departments are hesitant to tell their, longtime outside counsel, like, hey, come, bid against many other people or many other firms that we don't have a relationship with. We're trying to cut costs. Like, can you talk about that issue?
Yeah, so certainly it's an important piece to remember is that this isn't necessarily about bringing it out to new firms with a pure cost-cutting lens. It's very much about inviting the firms that you've got relationships with. So you've kind of absolutely spot on, Shai. We've worked with this firm for a long period of time. Generally, corporate legal departments like the UBSs of the world won't just have one law firm. You'll have 5, 6, 10, 20, 30 firms that you've got deep relationships with. So it's about saying, well, instead of picking up the phone and calling law firm A, we're going to invite law firm A, B, C, D. We've all got strong relationships with each of them. So you've already vetted for quality, and it's within the context of those firms. How do you know law firm A is better than law firm B, C, or D for this particular matter? So it's about giving the firms that you've got those relationships with the opportunity to put their best foot forward. And certainly the description, Bruce Bird, who's the general counsel of Palo Alto and former GC at AT&T, he said, look, we've gone from purely relationship-driven to relationship and data-driven, and that's now the new normal. We've got business relationships with these firms, but we're layering on some data to become more essentially bring more of a business lens to how we engage. So the relationships piece is really important, and it's not about debunking those relationships and bringing new people in. It's about, within the context of the relationships I've got, let's find out who is actually the best place and being a bit more thorough in that evaluation. So absolutely an important call out, because the relationships are really strong and long-standing. But I think an important point to explain that it's not about throwing those relationships out the window. It's actually about continuing to drive work to those firms, but doing it in a more thoughtful and structured way. Vincenzo, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything specifically around the relationship piece at UBS.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense, right? What we do at UBS is we actually pre-populated Pursuit with all of our approved counsel firms. So we know all the firms that we deal with are pre-vetted. They go through third-party risk assessments. They have everything vetted so that those are the only firms that we should be dealing with. And then obviously there's different tiers for those firms. We have the different panels and we have different tier firms. So we're transparent with the firms that we ask to bid. We're never going to ask a tier 3 firm to bid against a tier 1 firm just so that we can drive the cost. That's not something that we're trying to do. We're going to leave it where we're asking peer firms, and most of the firms actually know who they are because they've been doing the work with UBS for so long. We're just letting them know that you're going to be competing against your peer firms, trying to get the work and becoming part of a panel if you're already not part of a panel. So they know that going in. It's very transparent. So there's nothing that we're trying to hide or be sneaky about. And what it's really doing then when we have that relationship meeting with them, they ask us, well, why did we lose the work? Well, you lost it to a peer firm because, and we can point to some tangible information. Maybe their DE&I footprint isn't big enough. Maybe, their bench isn't big enough if we're talking about a litigation case, and we can give them that kind of information. But at least they know that they're competing for work against a peer firm. So it's going to help strengthen the relationship with those firms that perhaps are a little bit lacking right now.
Super useful insight. The last question, or potentially the last question, it involves providing feedback to the firms. So exactly what Vincenzo just touched on. Is there like an automated process for providing feedback, or is it a manual process, or is it, a mixture of both? Like what happens if the work goes to firm A and then there's firms, B, C, and D? Do they get like an email? Does, how does the legal department handle delivering the news?
So I might just talk about the technical part of the platform first and then throw to Vincenzo to talk more specifically about UBS. There's no automated feedback that's built in, but essentially the benefit of the platform is that all the information is captured there in a centralized spot. You can record and create scorecards so you're actually tracking the hows and whys, but then absolutely it's about being able to go in, dive into that information, and then have a conversation with the firms to close that feedback loop. So the automation is in the data capture, but then still they're one-to-one conversations that you're having, some via email, some via the phone, others like Vincenzo talked about on a more formal basis on a quarterly and an annual performance review. But each department's different, but from a platform perspective, it's not automated, although the data is all captured there that you can leverage and disclose to the firms in a way that you kind of prefer. Vincenzo, do you want to talk a little bit about how you and the team approach the feedback at UBS?
So we like to utilize the tool just to basically select the firm, notify the firm that they've won the bid, notify the other firms that perhaps they did not win the bid, but we don't give them any of that information. We leave that up to the attorneys. Sometimes the attorneys have that close relationship with the firms. They want to pick up the phone then and call the firm and explain what happened. Sometimes the attorneys don't want to do that. They want someone from outside counsel management to have that conversation. But again, we go back to the data. We're able to have that informed discussion and let them know exactly where they fell short. And maybe they didn't fall short. Maybe it was so close and we just decided to go one firm over the other so that they know for the future, what is it that I need to do to win this business? But again, it's like you said, it's all about the relationship. So if an attorney has a close relationship, some people, they don't want to affect that relationship at all. So they want to have that conversation on their own. They might even call the firm and say, listen, this is a new process that we do across the board. It's not just with you guys. We're not singling anybody out. But at least now we can have this informed conversation, tell you exactly why you didn't win the work. And they can have that. And like I said, I think that's helping to strengthen these relationships. And for the firms that don't like the information and they might say, forget it. We don't want to compete for this work anymore. That's fine. Then we know that that's not a partnership or a relationship that we want to have.
I think it's super valuable for the firms to know or have some idea why they didn't get the work. I know it's definitely like, if you don't have a platform like Pursuit, it's completely, there's no indication at all. Like there's nothing to even point to. So I think that's super, super valuable. So thank you. Thank you again, Josh and Vincenzo. I see we don't have any more questions. We had plenty of great questions. So thank you everybody who submitted. And thank you again, Josh and Vincenzo, and for this fantastic presentation. You brought Pursuit to light for us, to life, not to light, but to life. So thank you for that. And yeah, I learned a ton, and I'm sure many others did as well.